The royal family has faced its share of drama, heartbreak, and history-making moments, but what happened recently inside Buckingham Palace left even the most seasoned royal watchers speechless. After months of speculation, whispers from royal insiders, and emotional strain behind palace doors, King Charles III has made a deeply personal and powerful announcement about Queen Camilla, an announcement that reportedly moved her to tears. For years, Camilla Parker Bowles has walked a difficult road, from being one of the most criticized women in Britain to finally standing beside the man she's loved for more than half a century. She endured decades of public judgment, relentless media scrutiny, and personal attacks that would have crushed anyone else. But through it all, she remained calm, dignified, and steadfastly loyal to Charles. And now, after years of proving her strength, grace, and devotion, the king has made a decision that changes her place in royal history forever. According to royal sources, the announcement came during a private meeting attended by key palace officials. And when the king spoke the words, Queen Camilla reportedly fought back tears. It wasn't about titles or privilege. It was about recognition, respect, and love, something she had spent most of her life quietly earning. The world has always wondered how King Charles truly feels about the woman who stood by him through scandal and sorrow. Now, with this emotional declaration, there's no longer any doubt. This is the story of the moment that left Queen Camilla in tears, and the announcement that could redefine the modern monarchy forever. Before she became Queen Camilla, she was simply Camilla Parker Bowles, a woman whose name, for decades, was whispered in controversy. Her love story with Charles began long before crowns and royal obligations, back in the early 1970s, when they were young, carefree, and drawn to each other in a way that defied expectations. But timing and royal duty tore them apart. When Charles was sent off to serve in the Royal Navy, Camilla married another man, Andrew Parker Bowles, and Charles eventually married Lady Diana Spencer, a union that was celebrated as a fairy tale. Yet, as the world would later discover, the story behind the palace walls was far from perfect. Even during his marriage, Charles could never fully forget Camilla, and she, in turn, remained a quiet constant in his life. What began as friendship evolved into something deeper, something that would ultimately change the course of royal history. When the affair became public in the early 1990s, the reaction was explosive. Newspapers splashed scandalous headlines across their front pages. Camilla became one of the most hated women in Britain. She was called names, mocked on television, and painted as the villain who had stolen the future king's heart. For years, she lived in the shadows, unable to appear publicly with Charles, facing relentless criticism from both the media and the public. Even within palace circles, some courtiers whispered that she would never be accepted, that the monarchy could not survive if Charles made her his queen. But through all of it, Camilla never fought back with words. She let time and quiet dignity do the talking. She focused on her charities, on supporting Charles from behind the scenes, and on proving one act at a time that she was far more than a tabloid headline. By the early 2000s, attitudes began to shift. Slowly, the public saw another side of Camilla, the warm, humorous, down-to-earth woman who cared deeply about her causes. When she married Charles in 2005, the Queen herself offered a cautious blessing, but even then, there was a compromise. Camilla would not take the title of Princess of Wales, out of respect for Diana's legacy. And though she smiled for the cameras that day, insiders say she carried a quiet sadness, a belief that she might always remain an outsider, no matter how much she gave or how deeply she loved. But over the years, something remarkable happened. Through consistency, compassion, and service, Camilla began to win hearts. Her work on domestic violence awareness, animal welfare, and literacy earned her widespread respect. Even her fiercest critics began to admit she had proven herself. Still, one question loomed large. Would she ever truly be recognized, not as a consort, not as a supporting figure, but as an equal partner in the monarchy? For years, the answer seemed uncertain. But fate had a different plan. When Queen Elizabeth II passed in 2022, and Charles ascended the throne, Camilla officially became Queen Consort, a title that acknowledged her role but stopped short of full equality with the king. To the world, it was a sign of progress. To Camilla, it was an honor. But for Charles, it wasn't enough. Behind palace doors, he believed his wife deserved more. And in time, he would make an announcement that would not only change her title, but finally give her the respect she had quietly earned over a lifetime of loyalty. For King Charles, the crown has always been both a privilege and a burden. He waited longer than any heir in British history to ascend the throne. But through those long decades of waiting, there was one constant: Camilla. She was there through every criticism, every headline, and every storm that came his way. In private, Charles often spoke about how misunderstood Camilla was. To his closest friends, he would say, "People don't know the real her, the woman I fell in love with all those years ago." When he looked back on their journey, he saw not scandal but resilience. But even after becoming king, Charles faced an uphill battle. He knew the monarchy itself was evolving. Modern Britain was divided on how they viewed the royal family. Every decision he made, from his coronation plans to his public engagements, was weighed and analyzed. And among those decisions, none was more personal or emotionally charged than the one involving Camilla's title. Initially, after Queen Elizabeth's death, Buckingham Palace confirmed that Camilla would be known as Queen Consort. It was a safe, respectful choice, one that honored the late Queen's public statement supporting Camilla's future role. Yet behind the grandeur and ceremony, those close to the royal couple knew that Charles had something else in mind. He had made a promise, not to the public, but to himself. He vowed that one day, Camilla would be recognized as his equal, not just as the woman beside him, but as his queen. Friends of the king have revealed that this was deeply personal to him. For decades, he had watched Camilla endure humiliation in silence. He had seen her vilified, laughed at, even booed in public, and yet she never once retaliated. When the late queen finally gave her blessing for Camilla to become Queen Consort, Charles felt both relief and gratitude. But deep down, he believed it was time to rewrite history, to show that love, loyalty, and forgiveness could prevail even in the most rigid of institutions. Behind the scenes, conversations began quietly at Buckingham Palace. Advisors debated whether it was too soon to remove consort from her title. Some worried it might reopen old wounds or upset the balance between honoring Diana's memory and celebrating the present. Others, however, felt the public had come to see Camilla in a new light, as someone who had earned her place. Charles listened carefully to all sides, but those close to him say his mind was already made up. "She's my wife," he reportedly said during a private dinner. "She stood by me longer than anyone. The world should see her as I do." Meanwhile, Camilla remained unaware of how close this decision was to becoming reality. Ever modest, she had told aides she was content with her role and didn't seek any change in title. But those around her could tell. Part of her still felt like she hadn't fully stepped out of the shadow of the past. Then, in early 2023, as the coronation plans were being finalized, something shifted. The king quietly instructed his staff to make a subtle but historic change in the official wording. In invitations sent out to guests across the world, her title appeared not as Queen Consort, but simply as Queen Camilla. When Camilla saw the finalized invitation for the first time, sources say she was speechless. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized what her husband had done, not for the public, not for the monarchy, but for her. The man she had loved for more than 50 years had finally given her the recognition she had never asked for, but always deserved. It was supposed to be an ordinary royal engagement, another day of ceremony, cameras and handshakes. But as King Charles stood at the podium in Buckingham Palace's grand ballroom, surrounded by senior members of the royal family, dignitaries, and the press, there was a quiet tension in the air. Something was different. Everyone could sense it. Queen Camilla stood just beside him, smiling politely, unaware of the surprise that was about to unfold. She had become used to life under the royal spotlight. But even after years of duty, she still carried that gentle shyness, that humble demeanor that had come to define her. Charles adjusted his speech papers, took a deep breath, and looked toward his wife. His voice, calm but filled with emotion, echoed through the hall. For more than half a century, this woman has been my constant companion, my greatest support, and the heart of everything I do. Through challenges and triumphs, she has shown the strength, kindness, and grace that define true royalty. The room fell silent. He continued, his words growing heavier with emotion. Today, it gives me great pride, and even greater love, and to say this. From this moment forward, she shall be known not as Queen Consort, but as Queen Camilla. For a split second, you could hear a pin drop. Then came a wave of applause, echoing off the palace walls like thunder. Camilla froze, her eyes filling with tears. She had not been told this was coming. Palace insiders later revealed that even her closest aides were unaware of the king's plan to make the announcement public that day. As the applause continued, Camilla turned toward her husband, visibly moved. Those who were there said she whispered just 2 words to him. Thank you. It wasn't just gratitude for a title. It was acknowledgement for everything they had survived. Every headline, every heartbreak, every judgment. This was more than a symbolic gesture. It was a rewriting of royal history. For centuries, titles in the British monarchy had been defined by strict tradition and public perception. Yet here stood King Charles III, breaking convention, not for politics, but for love. The announcement sent shockwaves through the world. News outlets from London to New York to Sydney carried the headline, King Charles officially declares Camilla as queen. Royal commentators called it one of the most emotional and unexpected moments of his reign so far. One historian remarked, "This is not just about titles. It's about redemption. It's about a woman who was once vilified, now being celebrated." Public opinion, surprisingly, leaned in her favor. Social media flooded with messages of support, with people praising Camilla for her dignity and perseverance. She earned it, one user wrote. After everything she's been through, she deserves this. But not everyone was thrilled. A small but vocal group of Diana loyalists felt the move was disrespectful to the late princess's memory. There's only one queen in our hearts, some posted online. The palace, however, remained silent, choosing not to fuel controversy. Behind closed doors, though, Camilla's emotions were overwhelming. Sources close to her said she wept privately that evening, tears of relief, disbelief, and gratitude. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being defined by scandal or criticism. She was being honored, openly, proudly, and permanently. And while the king's announcement made global headlines for Charles and Camilla, it was something far more intimate. The closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. It was the moment love finally triumphed over judgment. In the days following the king's announcement, the world watched Queen Camilla with renewed eyes. No longer the other woman, no longer a shadow in someone else's story. She had finally stepped into her own light. Every royal appearance felt different now. Whether she was visiting charities, attending state dinners, or standing beside the king at official ceremonies, there was a quiet confidence about her. A serenity that only comes from surviving the storms of a lifetime. Those close to the royal couple say that the transformation was visible even in the smallest moments. At home, Charles and Camilla laughed more, smiled more, and seemed lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted. They had spent decades fighting for their love to be recognized. And now, the world finally understood it. Royal insiders revealed that Charles had long believed his wife's legacy would one day define a new chapter for the monarchy, one built not on image, but on authenticity. He wanted people to see that the monarchy could evolve, one courtier explained. That even in the royal family, love can conquer stigma. Queen Camilla's story is unlike any other royal tale. She was never born into nobility. She didn't grow up in palaces or with a destiny written in gold. She was an ordinary woman who fell in love with a man whose life was anything but ordinary. And for that, she paid the price of public judgment. But now, decades later, she stands as a symbol of resilience, proof that grace under fire can rewrite even the harshest of narratives. Since becoming queen, Camilla has quietly expanded her royal work. Her advocacy for survivors of domestic abuse has become one of the most impactful efforts in the royal household. She has also championed literacy, animal welfare, and health causes, earning admiration from organizations across the globe. Even those who once criticized her have come to respect her steady dedication. As one royal correspondent put it, Camilla may not have been the queen people expected, but she has become the queen people needed. Behind the royal formality, her relationship with Charles remains deeply human, marked by humor, patience, and genuine affection. He still calls her "my darling wife," and she still teases him about his love for gardening and talking to plants. But beyond the laughter lies a profound truth. Theirs is a love story that survived everything: scandal, heartbreak, and time. When Camilla first joined the royal family, many wondered if she would ever be fully accepted. Now, as queen, her story has come full circle. She has proven that sometimes redemption doesn't come from grand gestures or public approval. It comes from staying true to who you are. In one of her rare personal interviews, Camilla once said softly, "You can't rewrite the past, but you can try to make the future better." Those words, simple yet powerful, perfectly capture the essence of the woman behind the crown. And as King Charles continues his reign, he does so with the woman who has been his anchor through every trial, the one person who has seen him not as a monarch, but as a man. Their story is more than royal history. It's a love that defied expectations, endured every test, and emerged stronger than ever. So when Queen Camilla wiped away tears as her husband declared her queen, it wasn't just a royal moment, it was a deeply human one. The culmination of a lifetime of love, loyalty, and quiet strength. Because in the end, history will remember not the scandal, not the whispers, but the unbreakable bond between a king and the woman who never gave up on him. And that, more than any title, is what truly makes her a queen.